Welcome to the Cloud Developer channel. In today's session, we're going to cover the topic of SQL 2016 Express and Management Studio installation process. We're going to start off by downloading the SQL binaries. We're going to show you a few installation options, downloading the SQL Management Studio binaries, and then installing SQL Management Studio. And finally, we're going to show you how to connect to SQL locally, as well as connecting to it remotely, and the options required in order to get that done. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and download the binaries, and we're going to go to the Microsoft website where they can be downloaded from. And on this website you can see that they have the latest version of SQL 2016 Express Edition with Service Pack 1, and we can go ahead and click download here. The thing you'll notice is that when we try to download, it's actually a pretty small installer. It's only about 5.1 megabytes in size. I already have this downloaded, so I can go ahead and download it once again. And then when I go to this folder, what you will see is when you try to run this installer, it's going to show you a few different options. So the first option is the basic option, where it basically downloads the SQL database engine with the default configuration options selected, and one of the things it's going to do is as soon as it downloads it, it's actually going to install it. You can also go the route of the custom option, and you'll need to specify where to actually download the binaries, and it's going to download the actual database engine, as well as a couple of other features that come with it, for example reporting services and things like that. The option that I typically go with is downloading of the media first, and the reason I do this is because a lot of times I have to reinstall the instance of SQL for many other reasons, if I'm rebuilding my machine or need to redeploy something again. This way I don't have to constantly have the installer re-download the binaries for me. So I would choose the Express Advanced Edition. I will select the download folder, and then I would just go ahead and hit download. So I've already done this, so you don't have to watch me download a 1.2 gigabyte installer. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and just navigate to where it actually downloaded before. So, and I put it in this D drive software SQL 2016 folder. So what you'll see here is the 1.2 gigabyte installer, and when you run this, it's going to prompt you where do you want to basically extract the files. So you can change this folder to whatever you feel comfortable with, and go ahead and hit OK. And this is going to go ahead and extract the actual setup packages that are required in order to start the installation process. So let's give this a moment. And once it's complete, it will automatically go ahead and start the actual installer for you. So in this installer, what you will notice is that there's a few different options under the installation tab. The first option is the option we're going to choose, and this is going to kick off the installation of SQL Server itself. As well as there are a couple other options up here. So the next one is the installation of SQL Management Studio tools. Now, SQL Management Studio no longer comes as a feature of the SQL installation process. This will actually take you to a website where you can go ahead and install or download the actual SQL management binaries, as well as the SQL Server data tools, which are used if you're doing Visual Studio type development work, and it provides you additional features and functionality that could be useful for you. So we're going to go ahead and choose new SQL Server standalone installation and accept the licensing terms. Hit next. And my recommendation is, when you're doing this, if you're doing it for production usage type scenario, you always want to make sure that you check this option to ensure that you have the latest installation binaries available for SQL Server, so it downloads the latest updates, but you do need internet connectivity. Since I just downloaded this not too long ago, I'm going to skip this option, and what you could do is you can later on use Windows Update to check to see if you need any other updates installed for the instance you have. So in this case, it's actually searching for SQL Server product updates. I'm going to give this a little bit of time to complete. And it can reach out to the update service, so I'm going to go ahead and hit next here and allow this step to complete. And one thing you do want to make sure, if you're accessing this instance of SQL Server remotely, you want to make sure that your firewall is not blocking. So in this case, it's giving me a warning about firewall. If you click here, it will actually tell you the reason of why it's actually generating this alert. You can get more detail. Now, I don't actually have a firewall enabled, so I can go ahead and hit next here without any worry about the firewall port, well, the ports being blocked by the firewall. Okay, so in this screen you will see that by default it selects all these different options. Now, since I'm not going to be using this in any kind of high availability mode, I don't actually need this SQL Server replication option setting, so I'm going to go ahead and disable that. I don't need our services. I'm going to go ahead and keep full text search. As well as I don't actually need the usage of the reporting services, so I'll go ahead and disable that as well. The rest of the settings I'm going to keep, and I am going to point it to D drive, which is normally where I install my software when I deploy this on servers. So I'm going to go ahead and choose D and hit next here. Now on this screen, this is important if you are installing multiple instances of SQL Server. So by default, when you install a standard edition, it typically chooses the default instance, which means that you can use the name of your server to be able to connect to that SQL Server. In the case of named instance, you would actually need to make sure you're using the specific instance name in your connection string. So since I am not going to have any other instance installed on this computer, so I'm going to go ahead and choose default instance, and I have a generate instance ID for me. This is the default instance ID that the SQL Server comes with. You'll see here if you have any other instances already installed as well. So you want to make sure that they actually are unique per each instance that you're installing. Otherwise, it will not allow you to install. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And on the screen, it gives you the ability to choose the different components and what they're going to be running under. So typically I would leave this running as defaults. You could choose a specific domain account if you're inclined to do so. So where this becomes useful is if you're running in an enterprise environment and you do want to run your SQL Server database engine itself as a different service account that follows your service account policies within your enterprise. But since I'm going to be doing this development primarily with this instance of SQL on this local machine, I don't actually need to do anything like that, and I can go ahead and choose next. And on this screen, you have a few different options. So this is an authentication mode that your SQL Server is going to be configured for. If you're running in a domain mode where your server is joined to a domain, using Windows authentication makes it very nice and simple for you to be able to add domain accounts to allow access to your SQL Server. Now, if you are running in a workgroup mode, you would probably want to use mixed mode authentication, which allows you to actually create local accounts and use those local accounts to connect to your server. So in this case, I am going to be choosing the Windows Authentication mode, and by default it already puts my account that I'm logged in with into the SQL Server administrator, and I can add other accounts if I need to. You can also specify the place where you would want to store your folder information, or should I say actual data information for your SQL Server. So this is going to specify where do you want to store your data files, log files, and things like that. the tempdb information, user instances if you want to be able to allow them to run, and file streams. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose all the defaults and hit next here, and it's going to begin the installation process. Now this is going to take a few minutes to complete, so we'll just wait a little while and get back to the next steps of being able to actually install SQL Management Studio, as well as go through the process of connecting to it. Okay, so as you can see, the installation completed, and it's asking us to make sure that we restart the computer after the setup, because some files still have pending changes. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK here. Let this finish, and go ahead and click close. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I want to show you, how to get the binaries for the SQL Management Studio, and then we'll restart the computer so that it gives us a chance to make sure that the setup process is fully completed before we install SQL Management Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and click that button, and it's going to take you to the latest page where the SQL Management Studio installer can be found. So on this web page, you'll see that there is the download link to SQL Management Studio. At this point, it's version 17.0. But you could also choose older versions, and there's different languages that are also available, as well as download the previous releases of SQL Management Studio by clicking this link here. So I've actually already downloaded the SQL Management Server binaries by clicking this link, and it actually will download the full installer for you. You just have to give it a place where you want to store it, and I put it in the same place as I did the SQL Management binary, and that is going to be in the software folder, and you can see that I have it right here. So SSMS setup ENU 17.0. So since I already have it, and it's roughly 750 megabytes, it will take a little while to download. So since I have it, I don't need to do it right now. I'll go ahead and actually restart the computer, and then we'll get back to the installation of SQL Management Studio itself. Okay, so as you can see, the server has rebooted. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the software folder, and I'm going to go ahead and double click this SSMS setup to start the process of installation of Management Studio. And once I actually click install, this is going to begin the process. And it's going to quickly load all the packages it needs and begin the actual installation process of SQL Management Studio. So this is going to take a few minutes as well, and we're going to let this complete, and then we'll get back to it once it actually finishes to show you how you would connect using a local account as well as a Windows account, and then I'll also show you how to connect to it remotely. Okay, so the installation process has finished, and it's once again asking me to reboot the computer in order to make sure that all of the steps have completed successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and hit restart, and we'll log back in once again. Now what's interesting is I noticed that this installer, when you hit restart, doesn't actually do anything. So we'll just go to shutdown and restart from Windows and hit continue. So I'm going to go ahead and log in again. And here we are at the desktop. So here what we should be able to see now when we go to the start menu is a few different things. The first one that I'm going to show you is the SQL Server 2016 menu option. Now this is where SQL Server itself gets all of the shortcuts placed, and there's a few interesting things that you need to know about. So specifically, one of them being the SQL Server 2016 Configuration Manager. This is where it allows you to change some of the settings that are important for connectivity related to SQL Server itself. And there's a couple other things like documentation. There's also the installation center where you can go in and be able to change the different options that you want to have either add or remove to the installed version of SQL Server. The other setting or menu option I want to show you is under the SQL Server Tools 2017. And this is where the SQL Management Studio itself places its shortcut, as well as the SQL profiler. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose SQL Management Studio and let that start. And it's going to go through the initial loading experience. This will not happen again. Basically, it initializes all the default settings. And by default, you can see that it shows you that the server name is the dev machine, which is the name of the server that we're on. And the authentication mechanism is going to use Windows authentication. And by default, it uses integrated authentication, so it's going to use the credentials you're RDP'd or connected to your server to or with. In this case, I'm connected with this account, so if I choose connect, it's going to go ahead and automatically log me in using that account. So, and then in here you'll see that there's no databases that were created, so it's a blank installation. Now, if I want to be able to actually connect to this locally here, all I have to do is just specify the name of the SQL server and everything looks good. And this is the local way of connecting to the server itself. Now, what if you actually wanted to be able to connect to the server remotely or from another machine on the network? Let's see if we can actually do that. I'm going to show you by trying it using Visual Studio that I have on my desktop by trying to create a new connection. So if I go ahead and choose data connections and change it to SQL Server, it's going to ask me which machine do I want to connect to. Now keep in mind I do not have a firewall, so I'm going to specify dev machine. And if I choose the option of Windows authentication, because of the way that my setup at home is, I will not be able to do this because I actually am on a different domain. So if I choose Windows authentication, it's actually going to fail. So in this case, I would want to actually choose SQL Server authentication. However, if you remember during the installation process, I did not actually have that configured. So I basically do not have a way of being able to connect to that server. Now, what I'm going to show you real quick is how do you actually change those options. And you can do that by going back to the machine. If you have Management Studio already open, you can right click on the actual machine itself, go to Properties, and then here go to Security. Under Security, you can actually see that you can have SQL Server authentication. So basically it's mixed mode authentication, and if I go ahead and choose SQL here, I can go ahead and hit OK, and it's going to tell you that you need to actually restart SQL Server. And basically you can right click again and then choose restart, and it's going to ask you for elevated permissions if you have user account control management enabled, and it's going to say are you sure that you want to restart, then go ahead and hit yes, and it's going to go ahead and actually restart SQL Server. And now I should be able to actually start connecting using a local account. Now, in order to do that, I actually would want to make sure that the logins are actually enabled. So I already have an SA account created here. This SA account is actually created by default. Is just not enabled. So I'll go ahead and double click on this, and I'm going to specify a different password. I'm going to uncheck this enforce policy as well, so it doesn't ask me for a complex credential to be used. And I'm going to go ahead and set the credential I want to use, as well as under the status options I'm going to go ahead and set it to enabled, and you'll see that it's going to remove the X on the account, which means it's going to enable that account. So if I refresh here, you can see the account is enabled, and I should be able to actually use that now. So I'll go ahead and go back to my other machine and choose that account and specify my password. And if I hit the drop down here, it should show me the list of databases that are available. Now it showed me it's trying to load the database names, but in this case it's going to fail, and I'll show you why. Because basically, when you by default install SQL Server, it does not enable one of the options, which is to allow it to connect using TCP/IP stack, which is another requirement that we have to change a setting in SQL in order to allow this type of connectivity. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here and go back to the SQL Server, and this is where that SQL configuration manager comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the configuration manager console, and under the SQL Server network configurations, under protocols, you'll see there is shared memory, name pipes, as well as TCP/IP. So in this case, TCP/IP is actually disabled, and in order to allow this to work like that, you would want to choose yes, hit apply, and it's going to ask you to restart SQL Server again. Now you can go back to Management Studio, or another way to do this is if you go under SQL Server Services, you'll see that SQL Server is running right here, and you can right click and restart it from here as well. And SQL Server has restarted, and let's go back to my other machine, and if I hit the drop down again, you can see there's basically no databases here. Now this is because there are no databases. So if I hit test connection, it's actually succeeding, and I can try to hit OK, but there's no databases here, so it connects to the master database. So if I want to be able to see actual information here, it doesn't really show me much. So let's make sure we show you that it actually is working by creating a quick database. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK here, and it's going to create a database, and let's put in a table and give it the ID, name, and go ahead and save this here and call it test table. Now if I go back to my other machine and I refresh here, again, since I've already connected to a database, it doesn't really help me much. I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new connection, and go ahead and choose SQL again. I'll choose dev machine once more, and under the databases, once I actually provide my credentials, you'll see that under databases you will see the test database as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and just test here and hit OK, and you can see that the database as well as the table test. So if you want to be able to see the data or manipulate data, in this case it's actually showing us the table schema. You can double click on it and see the information in this designer. So if you choose to change it here, you can also publish it back as well. So this is the end of the tutorial, or this video, which tries to show you how to install the basic version of SQL Express with some of the defaults that will allow you to actually use it both locally to do development, as well as to access the SQL instance remotely if you want to start building an entire type of an application where you have different servers doing different functions, such as your web application or a database server, to spread the load in a different manner. So if you have any questions, comments, please go ahead and leave them under the video below, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can. And then in future videos, we're going to be using the SQL instance to be able to build some basic applications. I'll show you how to actually connect to the SQL server, how to actually build a basic database, and how to actually start using it in your application. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.